Let's pause for a minute to talk about Anchor by Spotify. Anchor is an easy to use, one stop shop to create and host your podcast. When we started making Sleeping with the Numbers, we used other hosts first that forced us to manually upload to Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. But with Anchor, you simply upload to a single spot and it distributes it automatically to all of these locations. But that isn't all. With Anchor, you can easily record, edit, and even add music directly from Spotify to your podcast to make it sound even better. So if you've been waiting around to create a podcast, wait no longer, because Anchor by Spotify makes it extremely easy to do. Anchor is completely free and can be used by downloading the mobile app on iOS or Android, or even right from their website, anchor.fm. Make an account today and get podcasting.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
All right, hey everyone, welcome into another episode of the Sleeping with the Numbers podcast. Dylan and Pat here for the conference championships week. Last week we had some good football, some bad football, and some bittersweet endings. So, of course, I think the game that everyone wants to talk about is the Buffalo Bills Kansas City Chiefs game. Very exciting back and forth type of game that we all know ended in utter despair for at least one team, and then the other team gets sprayed by Patrick Mahomes' girlfriend, champagne, which is a whole other thing that I don't think we'll talk about because it's stupid. But either way, Pat, it needs to be discussed. It's being discussed with the NFL in general. It's being discussed within the community. These overtime situations, they're not great, and it's hard to find a perfect middle ground, but I don't even think the current overtime situations are a good middle ground. We know in hockey, it's of course sudden death. But the thing about hockey is everyone has a fair shot at getting the puck right at the face-off, right? Whereas with the football games in overtime, it really is decided by a coin flip. And, if you look at just the probability of winning in overtime, it's so dependent on winning the coin flip and receiving the ball first, as anyone would expect. So what do we do, Pat? How do we fix it? What is good about the current system? What is bad?
I think what's good about the current system is it's all based off of chance. Like you mentioned hockey overtime. I always think about the soccer overtime where you have one of two options. Option one is there's actually no overtime. Most regular season games, they just end as a tie. But they also have more games where they can get away with doing that. And the ties don't necessarily affect the season in the long run. Whereas in football, if you have 3 or 4 ties, that's significantly going to hurt your chances of winning your division. So I think what I would do personally is try to avoid any type of tie. Like I don't like, and maybe I'm biased because the Steelers tied the Lions, but I would try to avoid any tie because then there's always going to be a debate about what you could have fixed, right? So I think for me, what I like right now is that you have to score to win. It's not like sudden death, golden touchdown, whatever. Like you can't win off a field goal unless that's like basically the last resort. So I like that. To me, what I would want to fix though is I would want to make it more fair in some way, shape, or form. So you make it mandatory, everybody gets a possession. Like I think the 10 minutes is dumb because we all know that like football, even if it's 10 minutes, can still last forever. I think it should just be possession based. So more like the college level, but not in the same type of back and forth. Like you have to tie each other in terms of points, but I think they should get rid of the 10 minutes because the 10 minutes is stupid because at this point we've already passed the point where most people want to watch the game anyways.
Yeah, the 2-point conversion things is a little weird in terms of the college. So I do like if each team at least got a possession, and if only on the second receiving team's possession they get shut down, sure, end it. But give both teams a chance on offense. Some people can say, well, your defense should have stopped them, and I think that's absolutely fair. But like we talked about before with the probability just based off of a coin toss, that really is – it really shouldn't have a factor at all at this point, especially in playoff matchups. So for playoffs, like you said, Pat, shouldn't have a tie at all. If we want to go with hockey as well, no ties at all. what do you think of? Why is he barking? Hold on, I got to check on.
Show is brought to you by BarkBox. BarkBox is subscription based. So now that it's just me, I'm going to tell you all of my picks before Dylan comes back. Just so you know what's right ahead of time. So I think the Bengals suck, so they're going to lose. And I think the Rams are pretty good, so I think it's going to be Chiefs-Rams. I'm just going to call it right now. Not really sure how these four teams made it to the final. I wouldn't have picked probably the Bengals or the 49ers at all to even come close, but good for Joe Burrow. He deserves it.
Okay.
I was filibustering for you.
Thank you.
I was reading Great Eggs of Ham and channeling my inner Rand Paul, but continue, please.
What do you think if the NFL went to a system that wasn't just based on, simple standings, win-loss tie, but if we switch to a system kind of like hockey, where there are points for wins, losses, and then let's say, like hockey, you get a point for even just making it to overtime?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I think right now, what kind of happened, we saw in the AFC North, going back to the Steelers, is that the tie did sort of serve as a point. Because right now, I think win-loss is your first tiebreaker before you start going into division matchups. So that tie could make a big difference. But like I said, I think that trying to avoid a tie in general in the regular season is good because it just leaves room for debate.
So, also at the end of the year, there are a lot of coaches getting fired, a lot of coaches getting hired, because if you have a vacancy, they got to get filled. So let's talk about that, Pat, here with the question of the day. Let's go into some of these head coaching openings that we got right now. So the teams that fired their head coach: Denver Broncos, Chicago Bears, New Orleans Saints, Jacksonville Jaguars. that's just so great. Minnesota Vikings, Miami Dolphins, and the New York Giants, Houston Texans, Las Vegas Raiders. So the two teams out of those that have already hired a new coach are the Denver Broncos. They fired Vic Fangio and hired Nathaniel Hackett, who was formerly the Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator. So pretty decent hiring there. Chicago went for the defensive side. They hired the Colts defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus. I have no idea if I said that correctly, but thank you. But he is now the head coach for the Bears. So let's just talk about them first, since those positions have already been filled. Going with the Denver Broncos, the team that probably a lot of people thought highly of coming into the season. They didn't end up drafting a quarterback, which many thought they would. They end up just bringing in Teddy Whitegloves and then ending the year with Drew Lock, which we all know how that went. Their running game, however, was the one strong point of their offense. Both running backs they had ended up doing very well. And if you had either of them in fantasy, you were probably a little bit let down because neither one of them really got the full workload. Javonte and Melvin Gordon pretty much split 50-50. So they go out, they bring in the Packers offensive coordinator. And, when you think the Packers, you think Rodgers, you think Devontae Adams, you think Aaron Jones. And with those three, there's a lot of passing work. So given that, Pat, do you think they wanted to hire this they wanted to hire Hackett to kind of get their passing game back on track?
I guess so. That's the only thing that I could put into it, because I was thinking to myself, the Broncos for the longest time were seen as a defensive powerhouse. But if you look at the AFC West, you're dealing with the Chargers, great offense, great young quarterback. The Chiefs, great offense, great young quarterback. And the Raiders just throw the ball a lot and nothing greatness about it. But you're still competing with three offensive firepowers. So I guess what I was confused about, is do you try to take the advantage and try to go defensive building? But maybe the goal is to bring him in, and then whenever they draft any of the young quarterbacks coming up, maybe Kenny Pickett, unfortunately, has been rumored to go to Denver. If you have an offensive coordinator to handle that type of player, and you kind of already have, like you said, the big running game, you already have a pretty good receiver core. People forget that they have Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant and Hamler and all these other guys, and they're actually pretty good. It's just they all got hurt last year. So for me, I'm kind of looking at the situation as if they get a good quarterback. I mean, they have the offensive talent. Now, I'm not sure about their O-line and how that's going to last, but is Mike Munchak still the O-line coach at Denver?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yes, we talked about him last week or 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, I always forget because I drink heavily. But what I want to know, just
You
kidding.
should be the Raiders coach.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say John Gruden's still available, and I don't know why he hasn't gotten any phone calls. But my big question to everybody is, are they going to get rid of Drew Lock? Are they going to play this game, or maybe they go and sign a different veteran quarterback? Who knows? But I think Denver's a better situation than what people think, because people want to say, oh, the AFC West, it's super powerful. But we also thought that about the AFC North this year, and we found out that when you have a lot of power, usually they balance one another out. Same thing with the NFC West. And of those teams, the two teams that we were like, okay, they're pretty good, but we thought the Cardinals were going to be the ones that came on top, didn't necessarily happen.
So do you think Rodgers follows him there?
That'd be interesting. I'm not really sure. I don't really understand the whole Aaron Rodgers saga in terms of where people, like, how they can assume he's going to go somewhere. It's all speculation. So I would say if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going to reveal anything, because I'm going to wait for other head coaching people to get hired. And I'm going to wait and see what Green Bay starts to look at in the scouting department for the draft, because if you're Green Bay and they say, hey, we're going to draft like a big O-line guy for you and they don't really need another wide receiver, but a target, right?
Right.
I might consider staying there, because the NFC North sucks. That's your best path to the playoffs right now. Denver's not. Pittsburgh's not. What other teams have been talking about getting him? Those are the two big ones.
Yeah, that's fair. And, it seems like the Broncos, the way they've been trying to handle the quarterback situation is short-term patching solutions, right? Like we talked about when we started talking about the Broncos here. We thought they were going to draft someone, and they didn't. They just patched a hole with Teddy Bridgewater, and we see how that kind of ended up. So really the question becomes, what do they think of themselves? Do they think they are just a quarterback away from, being a playoff contender? And if that's the case, then I think it makes sense to bring in Rodgers. But if not, if they think they are more in that rebuild status, draft someone. Don't even try to bring in Rodgers and spend up all that money. Draft a young quarterback that'll be your future. Maybe pay up to get some good offensive line around him so he stays safe. But it really depends on what they think of this team. Yeah, they have a lot of young players around them. Melvin Gordon on his way out. Javonte Williams, the new hotness there in the backfield. But yeah, get a quarterback, build up your offensive line. Honestly, if you have to, even though you have passing weapons, they can become a run-first team with Javonte.
You're good.
All right. Bears fire Matt Nagy. Long time coming. They hired the former Colts defensive coordinator. So they bring him in here. What happens with Justin Fields? Because obviously Justin Fields was drafted by Matt Nagy's crew, and they're kind of cleaning house here in Chicago. Do you think that they just bring in another Matt, the new Matt is going to continue to roll with Justin Fields, or is it going to be how I predicted, and the Ohio State quarterback isn't going to matter at all in a year or two?
I think that's up to Justin Fields. I think if you're bringing in a defensive head coach, your strategy at this point in time is just to remain competitive. And by doing that, you allow for Justin Fields to feel comfortable. I mean, the Bears are trash. They were not really in most of the games that they were playing. And if you have Justin Fields who's allowed to have time to take control of the game and give him that opportunity, it may or may not work out. Now, I kind of agree with you. I don't think he's going to be the future. I wasn't super impressed. I think he's going to probably end up like, the Steelers' future starting quarterback, Dwayne Haskins. But to me, this is a good situation for him because he doesn't need offensive help. He's clearly physically talented enough. The problem with the Bears is that their offense sucks. Like, your number one wide receiver, Allen Robinson, what did he do last year? And it's not his fault because he didn't get thrown the ball. But when your prime guy is not being productive, that's a sign that you have a broken offense. So to me, I don't think it matters if they bring an offensive coordinator because you can't coordinate, a pile of poop.
Popping into some of these other openings, Sean Payton is, quote unquote, stepping away from the team. He says he's not retiring. He thinks he'll probably come back. What that tells me, Pat, is he's realizing this is pretty shitty here without Drew Brees. And so he's going to take some time off, wait until they are able to build up the team a bit better, and maybe he comes back. He is still under contract. I think he has a couple more years on his contract, but he's stepping away. They are currently interviewing Byron Leftwich from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, offensive coordinator. That's actually really good. I that's a fantastic actually spot for him. Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, and then they're also interviewing their own defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, who are currently being interviewed for the Saints job. I keep saying it, but Byron Leftwich would be a fantastic head coach in general, but I feel like the Saints is a good landing spot for him because there is talent there. Alvin Kamara, of course, Michael Thomas, if he ever comes back and plays football. It feels like they could kind of do the same thing they did with Tampa, where they just bring in a bunch of really good veterans and try to play that way. Because what do they do with Jameis? What do they do with Taysom? I think they should personally cut both of them. But, what do you think happens here, Pat, now with Sean Payton taking his hands off the wheel?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on who they take. So if they take their own defensive coordinator, I can more likely see either Jameis or Taysom, one of the two, staying and trying to keep some type of consistency and holding on and building through the draft. And like you said, if Sean Payton does decide to come back, if you hire the defensive coordinator, it might be a little bit easier to say, hey, you're just going to be a temporary coach until Sean's ready. We don't know what that conversation looked like. So if Sean Payton said, I need a year off, I think they might just do the interim head coach. But if they go the route of Byron Leftwich, I could see a complete blow up, like you said. That would make the most sense to me.
And I think that's the most desirable landing spot for any of these free agent coaches, compared to the rest of these. Like, a lot of these are really big rebuild teams, right? But the Saints seem to be in a decent starting point for a new head coach. A team that really isn't in a great starting point is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Got rid of Urban Meyer. Trevor Lawrence, of course, is supposed to be the second coming of Andrew Luck. Really has not lived up to those expectations. You can blame it on Urban, but he still wasn't very good after he left as well. Current interviews that have happened, former Eagles head coach Doug Peterson, that would be terrible. It's like, I don't know, a slightly better Urban Meyer. Former Colts and Lions head coach Jim Caldwell, sure. The new hotness, Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who just really knows how to manage the clock, picks the right plays for that. Byron Leftwich also being interviewed. Todd Bowles, the Buccaneers defensive coordinator, interviewed. Alabama's offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien. Come on. And then their own interim head coach, Darren Bevel, and former head coach, Vic Fangio of the Denver Broncos. Pat, I got to be honest, all of those sound terrible except Leftwich, which he should not take on that job. Kellen Moore, sure, I think he's a good offensive mind. I think he would actually be able to coach up Trevor Lawrence a good bit. But they're really trying to make him seem like the new Sean McVay, and I really don't see it, especially, blame it on McCarthy, do whatever you want, but Dallas has not been up to par with all the talent and firepower they have on that team.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think too. They keep talking about how he's this offensive genius. How did Zeke do this year?
Terrible, but he'll blame it on the PCL.
But like my whole entire point is, like, I'm not really sure. Like, it just seems like some of these teams, they have these coaching staffs that they're like, oh, this is the hot staff, because Dan Quinn's also a hot topic as well. And had they not drafted Micah Parsons and Trey Diggs didn't have a great first half of the season, I don't know if he'd be in this conversation. Do we all remember the fact that he sucked as the Falcons coach? And the Falcons, to me, at one point in time, were comparable to the Cowboys. So not really sure how that's going to go. I'm looking through like my available coaching candidates, and I mean, I see a lot of, it's just staff from the good teams. Like both the Bills' offensive, defensive coordinators are on there. You said Byron. Eric Bieniemy, he's never going to get a job. It's a conspiracy. It's never going to happen. So I don't know why people keep talking about him. Jim Harbaugh is on this list for some stupid reason. Like, if it's me and I'm going with Jacksonville, just hire the interim head coach and just like accept defeat and rebuild the team. Like, people focus too much on who's the coach going to be. This isn't college. You're not actively out and recruiting people. And that's where Urban Meyer came in. And that's why he failed at the NFL. It doesn't matter who you recruit. It matters the team that you have. You need a good scouting department, good general manager, and you need a good system. Jacksonville doesn't have that. So no matter who the coach is going to be there, it doesn't matter. They still have 2 or 3 years before they're actually ready to go because they traded all their good defensive guys away outside of Josh Allen. Like, they don't have anybody else. They don't have that core there anymore. They don't have Jalen Ramsey anymore. So for me, I'm looking at this team. It's like it doesn't matter who they pick. They're just going to be trash next year. It's going to be like the way the Lions are. But then they hired Dan Campbell, and the expectation is it's going to take a while. And it's not. He wasn't a hot hire.
I'm checking out the Pro Football Focus grades on these offensive players for Dallas to see how they performed since Kellen Moore came in. So he became the offensive coordinator in 2019. So since then, in 2019, Zeke had a offensive rating of 77. This is, I believe, out of 100. 2020, 65.3, went way down. 2021, like we just talked about, it went slightly up, but still at 69.1. So since he's been there, Zeke's performance has gone down. Dak's performance, on the other hand, since Kellen Moore has came in, has gone up, which is kind of what we would expect. He was a quarterback's coach, right? So we would expect a lot of the calls to be more focused on passing and getting Dak to do more of the work. So with as big of a contract that Zeke has, and he's not really getting or performing up to par, that it seems like he could easily be a reason why the yardage just kind of has been going down. So 2018, he had 1,016 yards. I'm sorry, 1,016 snaps. 2019, 937 snaps, 789 2020, 853 in 2021. And we also noticed, especially early in the season when people were freaking out, a lot of split work between Tony Pollard and Zeke. So it seems to be a bit more focus here on the passing game as one would expect. What they do in the future, I really don't know, especially if he leaves. So if he leaves and becomes a coach somewhere else, I don't know what happens to Dallas's offense overall, because there's two sides of this coin, right? There's him leaving Dallas, so we got to look at the effect that has on Dallas, and then the effect of wherever he signs on that team. So it's interesting to talk about, but I don't know who would want this Jacksonville Jaguars job. It seems like not a great place to be, but if Kellen Moore wants the opportunity to train up Trevor, maybe that's the place for him. Another NFC North team, the Vikings, fired Mike Zimmer. Zimmer had a 72-56-1 record, 3 trips to the postseason, only 2 playoff wins. So not great. Fell short this year and the year previously. Currently, they are interviewing Bucs defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, Kellen Moore from Dallas, Rams offensive coordinator Kevin O'Connell, Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, 49ers defensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans, Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris. So a lot of defensive type of coaches coming in here, which again interests me because, of course, if you're bringing in a defensive coach, you're going to be looking to improve your defense. So, Pat, thoughts on that? Any worries for the offensive side of the ball?
Not really. I think that the head coach doesn't necessarily have as much influence as maybe people give him credit for. So I agree with you. Bring in a defensive coordinator. You're meant to improve what you currently have, but I don't think it takes away from the offense. Like we saw that their offense was pretty good, even with Kirk Cousins being above average. But looking through these stats, Minnesota was 31st in yards per game, 26th in yards per play, 27th in rushing yards allowed, and 26th in passing yards allowed. So bottom 5th in everything. So if you bring in a defensive coordinator, you're focusing, like you said, on the defense. Your goal is to maintain the offense that you have, which they should because they have the talent, and you're looking to improve that philosophy. So I think it's a good thing. I mean, think about it from this perspective. Mike Tomlin is a defensive coordinator at heart, right? He comes in. The Steelers' offense used to be pretty good until Ben got old. So like, I don't think having that defensive logic really affects the other side of the ball.
Yeah, completely fair. And hopefully, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, to probably a lesser extent, continue to grow in their roles. Miami Dolphins fire Brian. Well, I don't know if they really. Oh no, he was fired. Okay, Flores was fired by the Dolphins after 3 seasons. He went 24-25. Always kind of felt like the Dolphins were kind of rebuilding as well. As word whispers from the bushes. Everyone was hearing that Deshaun Watson wanted to come and play for Miami because he really liked Brian Flores. And Flores was also on Team Watson and not Team Tua. So probably a decent reason he left. And now, of course, more whispers from the bushes that he's going to go to Houston to try to get Deshaun to come back and play for them. Will that happen? Who knows? But right now, we'll talk about Miami. Currently interviewing Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, 49ers offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, Dan Quinn from Dallas, Cardinals defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, Kellen Moore from Dallas, Bills defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier, and Rams running backs coach Thomas Brown. I don't know. How do you feel about this in terms of coaching position that is wanted? Because I don't think Miami is a terrible team. It just feels like they haven't had the chance to really pick it up.
Yeah, I put them in the same ballpark as the Broncos, where, in theory, you're looking at this like, oh, this isn't a bad place to go. For the most part, the roster's pretty set. I wouldn't trade to. I don't know why people hate all these young mobile quarterbacks all of a sudden. They were all the rage.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an Alabama thing. But between him and Jalen and all these guys, like, everybody hates them all of a sudden. So, I don't know. Maybe people are just dumb and they like the shiny new toy. And just because Tua didn't have success early on, he's technically broken. If he came to the Steelers, I'd be pretty okay with it. But in my logic, I'm not taking this job the same reason I would take Denver, because you have to compete with the Bills and the Patriots right now. So, and honestly, even we saw the Jets were fairly competitive when they wanted to be. So I'm looking at the Dolphins. I'm thinking, okay, so of those 3 teams that we just discussed, Bills are established, Patriots are always good. The Jets show that they can win with basically nothing, and Zach Wilson has shown that he's somewhat competent. I'm nervous if I'm Miami, but I'm going to fall behind. So I wouldn't take this team because I could see Miami being the bottom feeder in the next few years.
Yeah, they, maybe the Jets get a bit more competitive. They obviously have the draft capital to kind of keep building up. What the Miami Dolphins do, I don't really know. It seems like a lot of people were caught off guard with this firing, just because he kind of seemed like an up-and-coming head coach. He's a bit younger as well. They never made it to the playoffs. They always ended up just short. They had winning records, went 10-6 in 2020. He'll definitely be hired somewhere. Where that will be is, up for grabs. But it really sounds like Houston might be the right landing spot for him. Giants also fired Joe Judge. He had a big ass party to celebrate his firing. Obviously, he expected it. They're interviewing Dan Quinn, Brian Flores, Brian Daboll, Leslie Frazier, Patrick Graham, and defensive coordinator for the Bengals, Lou Anarumo. God, I hope I pronounced that right. But either way, Joe Judge out. Looks like, I don't know. Brian Flores might be. This might be a decent spot as well. I feel like whoever the head coach is for the Giants might end up kind of cleaning house if they can't get it going with Daniel Jones, and maybe they end up getting a younger quarterback to kind of replace him, because Daniel has been a bit of an underperformer, and Saquon, of course, was supposed to be the savior there, and he just keeps getting injured. So it'll be an interesting one to see what happens here. The Giants also hired the Bills' assistant general manager, Joe Schoen, as their new general manager. So he's the one doing these interviews. Does he bring in Leslie Frazier because he knows him, or Brian Daboll? Does he want to surround himself with the same guys he's been with for a while? I guess it again, would you rather have the Dolphins job or the Giants job?
Can I take neither? I think I don't know. I think the Giants, unfortunately, they're in the better division of the two in terms of who can have the most success. But you have a broken star running back. You don't really have wide receivers that stay healthy either. And granted, COVID made it a lot more difficult. But I'm not super impressed with any of those guys. I mean, we like Kenny Galladay, but he's not the guy that I'm thinking to myself, I have to go to New York for Kenny Galladay. Evan Ingram didn't really get much opportunity, but that could be the fault of Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is another guy that we just, and I said quarterbacks that everybody love is just thrown off to the side. So I wouldn't want to go to New York mainly for the fact that they're still living on the fact and the expectation that they have to compete when Eli kind of took, in reality, a team that wasn't really that great. Like Victor Cruz kind of came out of nowhere. Or sorry, when it said Victor Cruz, was that his name or is it Vincent Cruz?
No, Victor, you're right.
Victor Cruz. Okay.
Yeah.
I almost got myself off. But like you have all these guys who the Giants were kind of like the fairy tale team for a while because they were taking down the big bad wolf. And they're still kind of living with that expectation. They're not going to have that right now with this team. So I think for me, if I had to pick one, I'd pick Miami because it's warm and because you're not in the spotlight as New York is. But that's really the only logic I would have. To me, they're both the same.
Place that's not the same, Houston Texans, probably this head coaching job is at the bottom of everyone's list except probably Brian Flores, which is really why I think he'll end up going there. Another guy they interviewed, Pat, Hines Ward.
That'd be great. I'm not really sure because I know he used to be the wide receiver coach for the Jets, but what did he do last year?
I don't know anything. I never saw him because usually they'll bring him up on the sidelines or something like that whenever he is a coach somewhere. But let's take a look. So
he was at Florida Atlantic. I just looked. Special
boy.
assistant to the head coach, which means I don't know what that means.
Nothing. That's
yeah,
what
but
it
I'm
means.
pretty sure he's banged Lisa Ann. So I think that's a positive that I look forward to. And I'm trying to look at this from, a fan's perspective. Is that's the kind of guy that I want leading my team.
Yeah, good for him.
I don't know if that's true. That's just a rumor.
Yeah, we'll believe it. Houston also interviewing offensive coordinator, that is Joe Lombardi. Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. Former quarterback Josh McCown. So it seems like they're reaching farther down in the barrel, probably because they have to. So Houston Texans set up David Culley to fail with just a horrible, horrible team. I think, do you want to keep David Mills here or do you want to draft another quarterback, Pat?
I would do both. I mean, this is to me the same situation that I would see with Minnesota. I mean, did Davis Mills disappoint you in reality with given the team that he had? I'd say no.
No, yeah.
So why not? I mean, you didn't. They spent a second round pick on him. Who cares at this point? Because if you cut him, it's a waste of a pick, and if he sucks, it's a waste of a pick. And if he's great, you look like a genius. So I probably wouldn't draft a first round quarterback this year because you have so many other things you could work on. Basically every other skill position in offensive line and defense, and may as well get a new kicker and punter while you're at it. So I'm going to keep Davis Mills one more year. This is another team where I would also bring in a Fitzpatrick type of player just to bring in some type of stability and something to help push Davis Mills. I'm not drafting a quarterback because it's not worth it. You're going to be in the same situation that Jacksonville's in.
Final spot here, Las Vegas Raiders. John Gruden, as everyone knows, resigned before he was fired. They also got rid of Mike Maycock, so also need a new GM. So again, kind of starting from the bottom here with the Raiders, which, they didn't really have far to fall, but they're interviewing Patriots inner linebacker coach Jared Mayo, 49ers offensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans, Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. That actually is pretty good. My money's on him if that's who they're going with. Also, Patriots personnel executive Dave Ziegler, which is an interesting one. But Josh McDaniels, he's been wanting to leave for a bit now, and it feels like now's the time. Maybe he does like working with Mac Jones, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was, actually interested in this coaching job.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. And to me, I view the Vegas job as maybe one of the better ones because, and the only reason I say this is you have this situation where you're not really in the spotlight. This is kind of how we talked about Miami being better than New York, right? So to me, I'm looking at Vegas and say, okay, so you have a decent running back. People give Josh Jacobs crap, but he's not that bad. Other than that, you have the ability to sort of rewrite this team. This is the team where you can kind of mold your own clay, right? And We know that their draft history has been horrible. Well, obviously, hopefully, with Mayock on, that's done, and maybe we find out that Davis is actually part of the problem, and there's more of like an internal issue with their scouting department. They just have this love with raw athletic talent, and it just results in DUIs. But to me, if I'm a coach, I'm looking at this job, and this is the most low key job you could probably get because people know the Raiders are a mess. The fan base is fair. I mean, they're not new, but in Vegas, like they're going to show up, right? Because it's the same thing with the Golden Knights. Like people just want to be a part of something that's fairly new. You have this brand new stadium. The NFL wants to put the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. This is the job where if you want to try to go for the high ceiling or high risk, high reward, this is the one you take. And if you lose, it doesn't matter because people are going to say, "Oh, they're on the Raiders. They suck." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're not a lot is expected. It feels like, and if you go in and do great, awesome. You have there's some talent in there. Darren Waller, of course, is probably the centerpiece. Defense looked good for a decent chunk of the year, and then it kind of went down. But looking at a contract here for Derek Carr, they can cut him and not owe him anything. So that is super interesting to me. Now, I don't think they'll do it. It might depend on the coach that comes in, but it's nice for them to have that option because he would be owed, if he plays, that is, $19.8 million. But if he is cut either pre or post June 1st, they owe nothing. There's nothing in the dead cap for cutting him. So just a thought there.
If I'm Vegas, though, just not to cut you off and be rude,
Yeah,
I would not hire anybody outside of Bisaccia. And my logic for that is you don't want to end up like Cleveland and have this continue rotating door where you keep firing the coach and then get a new quarterback. Then you get a new quarterback and then you fire the coach, right? And I could see that happening with Vegas, especially after you have a situation like last year where it was a complete meltdown. To me, I would keep him in there. I would honestly keep Derek Carr one more year and just start slowly building around. And then maybe next year get rid of Derek Carr because they're not going to win the AFC West. We all know that. They need more. This is the same situation that I kind of talked about with New York and Miami and all these other teams that are like on the brink of basically being average. You're not going to swing for the fences the first year and get that coach. And that's the problem with the NFL. They want to put all these guys who promise, in 1 year will be turned around. You need 3 or 4 years. Right. And for me, if I'm the Raiders, I'm looking for consistency. And hopefully, as we saw at the end of the year, the Raiders finished off decently. So I would go with what we already know, and that's Bisaccia is not bad. The team seems to like him, and you have a half-decent core where you're at least competitive offensively with two of the best offenses in football.
Moving on to the games this week, the conference championships kick off Sunday, 3 o'clock. Our time, 3 o'clock. The AFC championship game, Cincinnati against Kansas City. Kansas City comes in hot at a 7.5 home favorite, over under a 54.5 points here. I might be a little interested in the over of this one just because of how offensively powered both of these teams are. Looking at it, public 59% is on the Bengals spread, 76% of the money on the Bengals spread. So a lot of people thinking the Bengals are getting a little shorted here in terms of against the spread line. So, Pat, thoughts on this game? Who comes out on top? Is it going to be the new dynasty that is the Cincinnati Bengals, led by Joe Burrow, or is the incumbent Kansas City Chiefs, and with all of their veterans and their knowledge of the playoffs, Super Bowl, are they just going to make easy work of the Bengals?
Oh, real quick.
Yeah.
I got some breaking news.
Oh, shit.
It's okay. We only wasted a little bit of our time. Brian Dabble is the new head coach for the Giants, according to Rappaport.
All right. Where did he come from?
He's the Bills' offensive coordinator.
Okay, so exactly what we just said. Okay, we nailed it.
Good. It's almost like we read this ahead of time, pretend like we didn't know, and now we're smart.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the over for the Bengals Chiefs game that's a good bet. That's what I would take. Honestly, I cannot believe that the Bengals have made it this far, and not because they're bad, but just because of the way that they played at the end of the year. I was sort of surprised, but we talk about them all the time. They have a very well-balanced offense. unlike the Chiefs, which the Chiefs have a lot of hit or miss guys. So the question is the Chiefs going to keep rolling? Is Patrick Mahomes going to carry the team? Or is Cincinnati just going to be super consistent and allow for the game to work in their favor? And like you said, I'd take the over. I would take, definitely bet that it's going to be a close game. But I think I'm going to take the Chiefs because I'm looking at Cincinnati. And outside Jamar Chase, their playmakers just don't stack up to the Chiefs. And I think that's what, to me, the difference is.
Yeah, that's fair. Looking at the quarterback comparison as well, Pro Football Focus has Joe Burrow ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Burrow with a 92.4 rating, Mahomes an 80.9. And reading this, their clean pocket passer rating versus the under pressure passer rating, it shadows of Tom Brady here for Patrick Mahomes. So when Mahomes has a clean pocket, 112.3 passer rating, under pressure drops to 75.2. So it seems like the way to beat Mahomes here is, of course, get some pressure on him. The issue with that is the Bengals are 25th on the season in terms of defensive quarterback pressure. So little worrisome there. So if Mahomes has a clean pocket, we know what he can do. Kelsey can break free. Hill can obviously break free. And apparently Mecole Hardman can break free. So it is interesting there. A lot of hit or miss guys. But the thing that's key there, I think, if just one of those guys hits, they hit big. Travis Kelsey could have a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game, and no one would bat an eye because that's kind of expected. That's kind of around his ceiling, right? He could do such a thing and win the game on his own back. Tyreek Hill can do that same thing. Now, the other guys, Hardman, Pringle, they can go off as well. So it really feels like, rolling a roulette wheel. If one of them hits, you can win big. But like you said, on the other side of the ball with Cincinnati, they can spread the ball around and be a bit more safe. And I do agree with that. They have their superstar in Jamar Chase, who obviously will be hyper targeted and do a lot of work. But even behind him, Higgins had not a great start a couple weeks ago, but last week he went off. Tyler Boyd has been doing well too. Even CJ Uzama getting involved in this offense, and of course they have a solid but asshole of a running back in Joe Mixon. So they do seem to be a bit more well-rounded, and this might be a game, Pat, where defense wins the championship. And if I'm picking a defense, I honestly think the defense that will win this is Kansas City, even though we saw the Bills put up a ton of points on them. Sadly, the Bengals are not the Buffalo Bills, which is a weird thing to say because they've played maybe better than them. But it's an interesting one. So thoughts, who's winning, who's covering?
I'll take Chiefs to win and the Bengals to cover.
Shit. Yeah, I'll do the same. That sounds perfect to me. I agree that this 7.5. So if it was 7, maybe I'd think about it a bit more. But that extra half point really makes this a bit easier for me because they could win just by a touchdown, and then your spread win. So I'm with you. I will take Chiefs to win, Bengals to cover. And then the NFC Championship, we have San Francisco taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Rams, only 3.5-point home favorites in this one. Interesting here, because I feel like if they were to play, mid-season, this spread would be a bit bigger. A lot of people expect a lot from the Rams, but the 49ers have been showing up. Also, McVay has lost to the 49ers. I think it was like the last 5 times they've played. So they have his number. Kyle Shanahan has McVay's number. So this is an interesting one. On the season, the 49ers beat the Rams both times. They beat them in week 10 and then again in week 18. So, and I actually think that's what kept them from moving up in the rankings was that week 18 game, because both them and the Cardinals ended up losing. So, Pat, tough one here. Over under 45.5 points, a little bit lower scoring, but as we know, Cooper Kupp and Stafford can really get it going. They can put up points. 49ers, Deebo Samuel is the difference maker for that team. He came off of the field towards the end of the game last week. He hit his knee off of a defender's helmet, limped off the field, but he was actually able to come back in and play. I expect him to be fine. Looking at some power rankings here, Rams first in defense, San Francisco fourth, Rams seventh in offense, 10th for San Francisco. Man, Jimmy Garoppolo just continues to win games somehow. He has an insane win-loss record, and he gets paid a lot of money even when he doesn't play games. So Garoppolo versus Stafford, Pat, here. Who gets it done?
I think for me, I'm going to take the Rams. And I think the logic behind that is, they've beaten two really good teams in the playoffs, in the Cardinals and the Bucks. Teams that we thought were Super Bowl contenders. Looking at San Francisco, I'm just not sure if I think that they've had the same strength. I know that they beat the Packers, and the Packers were basically the Super Bowl favorite from the NFC, but the Cowboys weren't. So to me, I think the Rams have honestly had the harder schedule. And to me, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, strength of recent games. I'm going to take the Rams because I'm looking at the San Francisco 49ers, and even though they beat the Rams twice, it's going to be a close game. But I'm going to take the team that's going to be hot. I think I agree with you, what you said. Debo's really good. The 49ers have been sort of like the Bengals, right? Super efficient. And the Rams are honestly just like the Chiefs. So I think we have two very similar games. I think it's going to be close, but I'll take Los Angeles. I'm going to probably take the under as well.
Oh boy. Crap. You got to pick first. I want to be different. Man, I want the Rams to win. Oh, let me just put that out there first. I want them to win. I want Stafford to go to the Super Bowl. Kupp has been the MVP of this season. Hopefully he wins that award. Not MVP. He won't win that. That'll be a quarterback. But Offensive Player of the Year. Hopefully he wins that. I don't think it should go in the hands of Jonathan Taylor, even though he did well. He had some on and off games where Kupp was fantastic the entire season. This is just super difficult because I do think San Francisco has looked good really on both sides of the ball, but their offense, more so their run game is very dynamic. And I think that's a difficult thing for the Rams to do, even though they are a fantastic defense. The problem comes, obviously, Garoppolo is going to get pressured by Aaron Darnold, and oh boy, what's his name? Glasses. They just picked him up.
Von
Miller. Obviously, Garoppolo is going to be pressured there down the line, but it doesn't matter. Garoppolo doesn't need to hold on to the ball very long. They can do a short screen to Debo, hand it off to Debo, hand it off to Elijah Mitchell. They have a lot of options here. Kittle's there. He hasn't really done a ton this season, but he's still an offensive presence. So I'm just really trying to amp myself up to make this pick here, and I'll just finally do it. I'll take 49ers to win and cover, just because it's mostly because I want to be different here. I need one of us to win and one of us to lose. But at the same time, there are a lot of things going for the San Francisco 49ers. We talked about them, in probably, I believe it was our first episode, how I didn't really understand the hype around them. They kind of have been a mediocre team. And yes, that may have been due to a lot of injuries, and that's very true. But Debo has just taken such a step forward and really put this team on his back that it worries me for the Rams, that is. The one thing that could impact them even more, the number one offensive tackle in the game for the 49ers is questionable to play with a leg injury. And I believe he was questionable last week as well. So if he doesn't play, that obviously would have a big impact on this team. But for now, I'll take the 49ers to win and cover. That'll do it for the championship matchups. Check them out on Sunday. Also check us out. Check out our bets on Action Network. You can follow the model at SWTN_ML_model. You can follow me at Fantasy Football, PYANTASY Football. You can follow Pat at Pat_Fox, all on Action Networks. Our links are in the description. You can even just find our bets on the website, sleepingwiththenumbers.com. If you want to do some prop bets for these conference championship games, easiest way to do it is on Monkey Knife Fight. You pick a game mode, you pick some players, you pick more or less, put up a certain amount of money, you win. Hopefully. You might lose. That's also a possibility. That's what happens with gambling. But you don't lose when you use our link to sign up. Your first deposit is matched up instantly up to $100. So go ahead, click the link, make your deposit, and do some prop betting with Monkey Knife Fight. Link is in the description.
Yeah, another link for you to check out is for the Barks Box. That is a monthly subscription that you can get dog treats and dog toys sent directly to your house. And they have different versions of it depending on what kind of dog you have. So you have a smaller dog, you get normal bark box. They also have a puppy version. They also have Super Chewer for the people with bigger dogs. And we use the Super Chewer with my dog. It's great. She's a pit bull mix. She loves it, and she can barely destroy anything, which is good because then I don't have to go to the stores and buy her new toys. So I highly recommend it. I wouldn't, promote it if I didn't use it myself. And the treats are 100% made in the USA and healthy, so you know that you're getting good quality stuff. So check out the link below.